Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fair Housing Insiders. This is episode 37, and today's topic is on website accessibility. Is this a subject you should be paying attention to, or is it something that you can put off to down the road? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Kathy, welcome again to our show. We're so glad to have you with us. How you been?
Good, Jonathan. And this is kind of one of those subjects that is tough to talk about, but that's why we need to talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of news items regarding website accessibility, some court related matters that have come up about website accessibility. Is it fair housing? Is it ADA related? So where are we at today? Can you kind of give us the framework, the context of where property management companies are when it comes to website accessibility? What are some things they should be paying attention to? What do you think, Kathy?
Well, we've been talking about website accessibility for a year or two now because there have been a lot of cases that have found various businesses liable under the ADA because their websites were not accessible to people with disabilities. Usually what that means is the special technology has not been added to the website so that people who are blind can hear the website content. People who are deaf could read the website content, and other people with various disabilities are still able to get the information, to contact you if that's something that your website permits, and basically function on your website. So that's what website accessibility is about. Because of those cases under the ADA, I've been recommending that all housing providers make sure their websites are fully accessible and have used all that very recent technology to be made accessible. Recently, I was surprised when the 11th Circuit, which is the Court of Appeals for most of the Southeast region, came down with a very important decision finding that the ADA does not require website accessibility. What I think that means now is that issue will probably end up in the Supreme Court because there are other circuits who have decided differently. So for now, we're a little up in the air, whether it's a legal requirement or not. That may depend on where your property is located in the country. So that's the concern, and it may be years before we hear from the Supreme Court on this. In the meantime, the question is going to be, if it's not a violation of the ADA, are there other laws involved? I do know there are some advocates, especially in the state of Florida, who are attempting to make the case that an inaccessible website for a housing provider violates the Fair Housing Act. Now, that is not law now. It's never been law. And we'll see if they're successful with that idea. I'll be surprised, but it wouldn't be the first time I was surprised. So we're just going to have to wait. In the meantime, the question is, if it's not an absolute legal requirement, is it the kind of thing you should be doing anyway? And I guess in general, my view would be probably, but there are lots of issues involved. And Jonathan, maybe you can talk to some of those about the pros and cons and costs of making a website accessible.
Yeah, I think I love a lot of the thoughts that you said there, Kathy. There's just a lot to consider, and there's just the general principle involved when it comes to website accessibility. We practice that as property management companies, and I've listened to many of your teaching sessions. Accessibility is just part of the everyday language in property management. So a really important topic to talk about today. So why don't we look at a scenario just so our audience understands, like, what do we mean? So what would be an example of a website that's maybe not completely accessible? So in this scene here, a prospect is calling the management office because she can't fill out a form on the website. So let's take a look at the scene and then we'll discuss that together.
I'd like to set an appointment to visit the 2-bedroom apartment you have available.
Sure, I can help you with that. How did you hear about us, Mrs. Bellamy?
I found your website through a search and I wanted to make an appointment using your online form, but I use a screen reader and your form doesn't have any of those fields labeled, so I couldn't fill it out.
All right. So what do you think about that scenario, Kathy?
Perfect example. We have someone here who's not able to use the website and contact this management company because of their disability. So that's an example where the website has interfered with the prospect who has a disability from contacting them. So they have to contact them a different way by, for instance, picking up the phone and calling them. But other people without disabilities get to use the website to contact that property. So that's a good example of why perhaps it would be good business practice to have an accessible website. But, luckily, Jonathan is a person who handles this kind of thing and knows lots of details about website accessibility. So, Jonathan, why don't you talk to our community about the considerations, the practicalities, the costs of having an accessible website?
Yeah, it's not that difficult anymore, Kathy. A few years ago, people were looking at making their website accessible and then looked at the price tag and were like, oh, wow, that's not in the budget. It used to cost thousands and thousands of dollars potentially. And then you'd have to have someone who was monitoring your website for every single piece of content that would go on it in order to make sure it was accessible. And so it became cost prohibitive and maintenance prohibitive. And so many companies, not just in property management, but just in general, just ignored that particular component of their site. But as we've discussed, it's something that's very important to property management, accessibility. And so thankfully, it is a lot less expensive and a lot easier to manage just using plugins on a website. If you want to see an example, you can go to the fairhousinginstitute.com and see how we've implemented that for the website and how it manages all different types of disabilities, and you can see how that works. So that's the general idea. Is just don't be overwhelmed by the technology piece of it, and certainly don't be concerned anymore about the costs involved, because it's not that way anymore. And in general, in my experience, the things that you need to do to make your website accessible are requirements by Google anyway. So Google has its own list of items in order to determine whether your website is friendly. Is it optimized for speed? Can it read the images and determine what those images are about on your site? Is the text able to be read, or is it built in HTML and makes it difficult? So this episode isn't going to go into all the big details, obviously, but just for you, the audience, just for you to understand that, don't ignore it. Understand that you can successfully look at your website and make it accessible, and be Google compliant, and more importantly, be people compliant for those who have disabilities.
It makes sense. It sounds like whether it's a legal requirement or not, it's a good business practice.
Absolutely. So a nice scenario to think about, and it's not too difficult to do an audit of your site and determine where some improvements can be made. So I guess in summary, Kathy, for this particular show, there's a lot of lawsuits that are out there outside of property management. Based on your comments, is that the law right now, as of today, no. However, it is one of those things that property management companies should be paying attention to and thinking about, and not be swayed by difficulty or technology anymore. Like, it is something that's pretty simple to institute today.
Yeah, that sounds like a good summary.
All right, perfect. So be sure to check out the fairhousinginstitute.com. You can see an example of that. Click on the bottom right-hand corner. You'll see the little disability symbol that is there. If you'd like to kind of see how the technology works. And of course, reach out to us and ask if you have any question whatsoever. We'll be happy to help you out. Another education session, episode 37 for our wonderful community. Please share this with your community, share this with your team members, share this with your computer department, your IT department, and get their comments and feedback. But we thank you again for paying attention and tuning into this show. And we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Take care, everyone.